Carol and Diane and Lynn and Marina and Harv and Mara. Harv and Mara, we have a common friend, your neighbor. And apparently you are living in our house that we lived, 40 years ago.
Oh, really?
That's our home. Yeah. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes,
Remember
thank
that
you for
house very
telling
well.
us.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we'll have to have you over sometime to see your home.
Oh, I would like. And hello to Lynn. Uh, and oh, good, Barbara. I can see you now. I'm so happy. And Howard. Howard, is that picture before and after, kind of? And Natalie and Mark. Um, thank you, thank you. I like to connect by seeing you also, so that's just me. So, Bruchim Habayim, welcome. And of course, before we start, I'd like to do the blessing, and I'll do the introduction to the blessing of studying the words of Torah. So, if you now at this point, if you can silence yourself a little bit, so I'll be able to hear. Okay. I think of God as continually flowing fountain of blessing and the holy teachings. As a person with free will, I can choose to align myself with God's wisdom or try to hide from the profound teachings that I could guide me daily. When I say a blessing with sincerity and study words of Torah, I am choosing, once again, to align myself with the ever-flowing goodness of God's love. And as you know, I always like to say, when I pray, I speak to God, and when I study, God speaks to me. So just think about this for a minute. So today's portion, I'm dedicating to Effie Katz, who passed away on Wednesday. Thank you, Herman, for letting me know.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was at the time of University Synagogue, where I was the vice president of education, remember?
I
Uh,
do.
yeah, Baruch Hashem, thank
Yeah.
God. Thank God for the blessings in our life and knowing the people who we loved and trying to cope when they're no longer with us, only in memory. So this is for Effie, today's class. So today is the Torah portion of Shoftim, and I'm going to give you a general outlook on the Torah portion, and maybe a little bit a snippet also on the Haftarah, because it's part of the consolation program that we have before high holidays. But meanwhile, I'd like you to turn to page 1097 in the Etz Chaim. Do you have the Etz Chaim?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's on page 1097. Otherwise, it is chapter 19 in Deuteronomy. I have several of the Torahs here. So, you know that I love to have archaeology. I have archaeology books to support the Torah portions that we are in, and it covers all the whole Tanakh, the whole Torah, all the books. So this is a picture I want you to look at. This is a picture that was found on the wall of a Egyptian grave, and it was from the grave of Nahat, and it was at the time of the fourth the Chutemis, the fourth Chutemis in 19 before the Common Era. So it goes back, Mary, and obviously the Egyptians always drew pictures on the walls, particularly in their graves, and this is one of those pictures that shows two farmers. Again, I'll show you two farmers uh, with their axe cutting a piece of wood, and they're very close to one another. And so the idea is, the topic will be today of what happens when a piece of the axe flies off and accidentally kills someone. And that's a picture that supports that vision. So I'd like to read to you the overall Torah portion. And so Moses instructs the people of Israel to appoint judges, shoftim, and law enforcement officers in every city. And of course, the famous statement, justice, justice shall you pursue. He commended them. And you must administer it without corruption or favoritism. Crimes must be meticulously investigated and evidence thoroughly examined. A minimum of 2 credible witnesses are required for conviction and punishment. By the way, do you know what are the credible witnesses? Somebody who is not a drunk, doesn't drink a lot, and somebody else who is not a gambler. So 2 credible witnesses. Now, in every generation, says Moses, there will be those entrusted with the task of interpreting and applying the laws of the Torah. That means also today. According to the law that they will teach you and the judgment that they will instruct you, you shall do. You shall not turn away from the things that they say to you, to the right nor to the left. Shoftim also included the prohibition against adultery, sorcery, laws governing the appointment and behavior of the kings. It's not the ultimate power. And guidelines for the creation of cities of refuge, for the inadvertent murderer. And this is what we are going to be touching on today. Also set forth are the many of the rules of war, the examination from battle, the exemption from the battle for one who has just built a home, planted a vineyard, and got married. And it particularly says, or somebody who is afraid or has a soft heart. The requirement to offer terms of peace before attacking a city, and the prohibition against destruction of something of value, exemplified by the law that forbids to cut down fruit trees because you might be able to use it when laying a siege on a city. And then, of course, the famous statement, for man is a tree in the field. And Israeli poets have written beautiful melodies to this line. The parsha concludes with the law of Eglach Arufa, the special procedure to follow when a person is killed by an unknown murderer and his body is found in the field, which underscores the responsibility of the community and its leaders, not only for what they do, but also for what they might have prevented from being done. So this is the Torah portion, and it's loaded with stuff that we can talk on each one of them for a long time. But it's very, very important to think about, where am I standing in this Torah portion today? Is it archaic or is it relevant to today? So obviously the Torah is always relevant, right? Every week it's relevant. So we'll talk about that. I also wanted to share with you a bit of the Haftarah. It's from Isaiah, and it's the fourth of the series of the seven Haftarot of consolation. And we start counting on Tisha B'Av and continue till Rosh Hashanah. So for the past 2 weeks, Israel complained that they have been abandoned by God, right? And they are not satisfied with anything that the prophets are saying. So instead, they demand that God alone will comfort them. In response to this, Haftarah begins with God's response, I will comfort you. So that's part of this wonderful Torah portion. Okay, so I'd like anything you want to say so far? Anyone? Okay. So I'd like someone to read for us, please, from the Etz Chaim on page 1097, chapter 19, 1 through 13, including 13. Who would like to read, please?
God has cut down the nations whose land the Lord your God is assigning to you, and you have disposed them and settled in their towns and homes. You shall set aside these cities in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. You shall survey the distances and divide into 3 parts the territory of the country that the Lord your God has allotted to you, so that any manslayer may have a place to flee to. Now this is the case of the manslayer who may flee there and live one who has killed another unwittingly without having been his enemy in the past. For instance, a man goes with his neighbor into a grove to cut wood. As his hand swings the axe to cut down a tree, the axe head flies off the handle and strikes the other so that he dies. That man shall flee to one of these cities and live. Otherwise, when the distance is great, the blood avenger pursuing the manslayer in his anger shall overtake him and kill him. Yet he shall not incur the death penalty, since he had never been the other's enemy. That is why I command you to set aside 3 cities. And when the Lord your God enlarges your territories, as he swore to your fathers, and gives you all the land that he promised to give your fathers, if you faithfully deserve all this, if you faithfully deserve all this instruction that I enjoin upon you this day, to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways at all times, then you shall add 3 more towns to these 3.
In other words, 9 at this point. Right. Go on.
Thus, blood of the innocent will not be shed, bringing blood guilt upon you in the land that the Lord your God is allotting to you. If, however, a person who is the enemy of another lies in wait for him and sets upon him and strikes him a fatal blow, and then flees to one of these towns, the elders of this town shall have him brought back from there and shall hand him over to the blood stranger to be put to death. You must show him no pity. Thus you will purge Israel of the blood of the innocent, and it will go well with you.
Excellent. And so after all this, it concludes with, and it will be well with you. In other words, in Hebrew, it says "Vetov lecha," and it will be good just for you. It's in a singular form. So, yeah. So what do we seek here? What do we see here? Anyone? I like participation. What do we see here?
Say something.
What is the issue here? Steve? I cannot hear you. Unmute yourself.
What I don't understand is why we need these cities. Somebody, apparently it's the elders in the city as opposed to just a judge, is ultimately making a decision of what penalty is appropriate based on the actions and intentions of the person who killed another. I mean, we have that in our court system today.
Exactly.
But somebody's making that decision, some kind of judge. So I don't understand the need for the city unless it's because they fear vigilante justice. But in that case, the person seeking vengeance, all they have to do is get to the person before he reaches the gates of the city or the walls of the city. So it seems like an awful lot of commandments and requirements that, I don't know, it seems burdensome and unnecessary to address the fundamental issue when all you really need is a justice system and a judge to accomplish the same thing.
Well, being a lawyer, obviously, you know what happens when there is a lot of waste of time. There is one thing that is very important to us to remember. There is a lull time between running away to the city because he's so scared, look what happened here, and actually the judgment coming down on it. In other words, between the time that is spontaneous response that he runs away because he's so fearful, the killer, right? The accidental killer, right? He runs away because of what happened in a panic. And then somebody says, wait a minute, let's look at your case. Now, that somebody is somebody who was appointed and who has knowledge in the field. So it's not just an ordinary person, it's somebody that has some credibility from the society who would accept his judgment. So there is a lull of time between running away spontaneously and knowing actually what happened, what are the facts. So that is the space and the need. Also, as you said correctly earlier, the vigilantes, the family, will not kill him. Maybe it was an accident. But how do you find out? So you have to do the research. So that is the role of that judge. The lull time, the in-between time. Thank you for the question. Harvey or Mara?
It's Harvey.
Yes, thank you.
It seems like this section is setting up cities of refuge. And I want to point out that in Hawaii, there is a city of refuge. The Hawaiian culture had it. And my question is, who enforces all of this? That's the question.
The city of refuge, the shoftim and the shotrim. That's how it starts, that you have to appoint yourself judges and policemen.
Yeah.
They are what we have today. The Torah portion starts with that. Shoftim v'shotrim tikbeu lachem. You should make yourself judges and policemen. So, yeah. Anybody else? Any questions? Okay. So the purpose of this, obviously, of this a Torah portion is to protect somewhat the innocent, quote, the innocent, not completely innocent. But let me ask you a question that I'd like you to ponder on as we go on. What do you do when you feel or when you know that because of your actions, you are entirely alone in the world? Because of your actions, you are entirely alone in the world. Think about it for a minute. Rebecca.
I can't answer what you just asked, but what came to mind is it almost seems like the creation of these cities creates segregation, or the haves and the have-nots.
How so?
Well, you're segregating people. from the haves and the have-nots, right?
What do you mean the have and have nots?
Well, the haves are the
Somebody who
good people,
killed
and
and
the
somebody who
have-nots
did.
are not the good people. And so I would think there'd be more problems in the cities of refuge than there would be in the cities of others.
Of course, that makes sense because it's a city filled with killers, right? And you would think everybody would kill one another, but that's not the case. And we'll talk about it in a minute. But thank you for that question. Okay, but that's not the case. Killers are afraid to kill other killers, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe not. Listen,
Well,
I'll tell
because
you.
they'd have to go with their families. I mean, would the families be left
That is a
in
very good
another
question.
city and the
Rebecca, this is a very good question because that's exactly what happens. They have to leave their families in order to go to the city of refuge. And what happens? They're isolated, they are exiled in a way, right? So that's something that we have to look at. Are they being protected? They're not. So, in other words, the city of refuge is not exactly a heavenly space for anyone. And even though he might come out innocent, you know, yet he is exiled from everything in his life, his family, his home, his job, whatever he was doing. Suddenly, life has changed for him or her. So, yes, Mara. And I saw you, Herman.
So I think this is an interesting Torah portion at a time of the year when we're talking about Teshuvah.
Exactly.
And makes me want to consider any action that I have inadvertently done affecting another person, and how I attain my own city of refuge, I suppose, in order to either correct what's been done, to correct what's been done, or and to find peace in my own heart and feel that I'm worthy of forgiveness.
Very good. This is exactly one of the topics in this Torah portion. Very good. Herman?
What I don't quite understand, Rabbi, in the accidental death, okay, here the example of the axe.
Yes.
The man flees. If he reaches the city of refuge and lives there, nothing can happen to him. But he doesn't get to the city of refuge in time and somebody kills him. Why is that somebody off scot-free?
Well, this is exactly what the Torah portion and what these laws are to protect the innocent from the vengeance, the blood vengeance. Now, remember, in our ancient time, the families were the ones who were supposed to support and protect the inhabitants of their family members. Yes? So, in other words, tribal societies, right? In the tribal society, we have this kind of protection, as we say. The gangs of today, the gangs of today, they feel that they have a family and they are being protected by the heroines, the heroes and the heroines of these gangs. Just to share with you personally, I volunteered in the women's prison in Corona for 12 years. So I have somewhat of a little bit of knowledge of the way their mind is working. And I was teaching Talmud in the prison because I wanted to show them and it were all women. And mind you, I was there with lifers, and people get life if they killed someone, right? So I was teaching Talmud to a group of killers, but had to change their mind that you can't uh, attack somebody out of vengeance of a spur of a moment, and then you spend the rest of your life in prison. Um, but think about before, this was my goal for them, before you do something, before you say something, think about who is going to be affected by your actions, whether it's speech or action. Who is going to be affected? The moment we take this, not even 30 seconds, just to think about, is it my actions going to affect 5 different groups of people usually? Those who are there and those who are not there. Those, in other words, those who are witnessing and those who are not witnessing, but heard secondarily. And of course, your loved ones around you and you yourself. So who is going to be affected by, and this was my goal when I was teaching them Talmud, because the Talmud goes, what if, what if, what if, you know that, right? So the Talmud brings up these issues, and I wanted them to think differently. But I stopped going when the corona broke out. But I'm still in touch with a few people, a few of the women in the prison. Anyway, that's a sidebar. So, okay.
Why does the individual who avenges by murder allowed to go scot-free?
Well, it used to be, but not since these laws came in. In other words, from the time they entered the land of Israel, the laws were different. The laws were different. Actually, when they were encamped just before they crossed the river, the Jordan River, right there, they were already applied. These laws were already applied. Not to, in other words, when I'm expecting my tribe to take care of me and they don't, it's a failure of the society. And if the society starts disintegrating, then we have an issue. But the point is that what was before, it's no longer now. Now meaning the encampment before the land of Israel and entering the land of Israel. Now, okay. So the issue is when the killer is an accidental killer, רוצח בשגגה, is his life changes forever, even though it was an accident. But the Torah emphasizes it was not the result of hatred. It was an accident. He didn't know him from before. It was not premeditated. It was just pure carelessness. So, רוצח בשגגה, the accidental killer, is supposed to leave his home and go to a designated place that was chosen, right? So I want to add, because it was not in the book, in the Torah portion, but it was in my archaeological book, that the 3 cities of refuge was Kaddish, which is today is just south of Beersheba in the south, and it was in the territory of Naphtali. The second city was Shechem, Nablus, which is about, I would say 20 miles north of Jerusalem, in the tribe of Ephraim. And then Hebron, which was in Judea, which is, just south of Jerusalem. So obviously the cities were placed in different locations, so it'll be easy to run and get in there. Now, it's very interesting that towards the end of what Herman just read, that it says that if your territory is enlarged, that God has given you, that God has promised you, if the territory is enlarged, the city of refuge also create more cities of refuge. So it's not the original, and he'll have a hard time running before being caught. and that by itself is a beautiful idea. So suddenly we have from a person who was an ordinary person to somebody who is a killer. And his life is never the same, right? So again, what happens when this accidental murderer have to uproot his life and venture into a new place of refuge? Anyone? What happens to him? Think about, God forbid, yourself.
Punishment, isn't it?
Yeah. He's alone and he's punished, basically.
So he's not going free, right? Right. Thank you. Fern?
I just am thinking about what it feels like when you do something shameful or wrong. And you don't even need to be physically isolated to have yourself be punished or to feel it or to feel alone. A wall becomes erected in some way. And I think human beings try very hard not to feel that. It's a terrible feeling to know you've done something terrible, whether intentionally or not. And that isolates us, whether we're banished or not.
Very good point. I just want to touch that accidentally or not, it's a big difference.
Yes.
Yeah. So we are talking about the accidental killer. It's a totally different story, and something is premeditated. Steve, I see your hand.
I just had a question. Do we
Please.
know if this actually happened and operated that way? Is there any evidence, or if this is like aspirational and really just setting forth guidelines for operating a justice system?
Great question. The answer is yes, it was operational. And we know it. How? Okay, I'm diverting a little bit because the question was asked. The city of refuge, we know that the Levites were living there with the murderers. Why the Levites? Anyone? Why the Levites?
Because they don't have land of their own.
Very good. That's one. What else? Anyone? Why the Levites? The Levites lived with the murderers in the city of refuge, not only because they didn't have a land of their own, but also because the Levites were working, they were responsible on the holy work of the Mikdash, of the sanctuaries, of the holy temple, right? The Levites were the workers. So the Levites were, wherever they were building, that's also changed before and after entering Israel. Before they were able to build wherever they were in, wherever space they were at. When they entered Israel, it was only the designated places that God has chosen. In other words, to limit the spaces. But the Levites were working in these little towns doing their job. And this is how they got food and sustenance for themselves also. Because there were certain sections of the animal sacrifice that was given to the Levites, and there were certain sections that were given to sacrifice for God. So, good question. Did I see anybody else's hand? Okay. The Levites were taking care of them. Now listen to this. The Talmud talks about this. The Talmud talks about this, that the people, the killers that were in the city of refuge were able to leave the city of refuge only when the Levite will die. Okay? What's the problem with that? I want you to think. What is
when all the Levites die, or any specific Levite?
The chief Levite. The chief Levite.
Well,
Good
but
question.
when he dies, there's a new chief Levite.
Yeah, but by the time, from the time of his death and the time of choosing another chief Levite in the city of refuge, there is a time span. At that time span, they can run away because there is nobody who tells them you may not do that. So what happens with this problem when the chief Levite dies? That the killers would want to kill him. Simple, right? So to answer your question, was these cities existed really? The answer is yes. Why? Because the mothers of the Levites will come and care for the Levites so that his life span will be longer. Interesting. So the lifespan of the Levite will be longer because he didn't have land, he didn't have property, and maybe there was a time when he would go hungry. So the mother of the Levite, of the chief Levite, will come and care for him. And that's in the Talmud that it happened. So we know the cities of refuge existed. Good question, Steve. Thank you. Okay, we're going on. So, so we know, and Fern said correctly, that it's very, very hard to live in a space personally, right? Personally, when you have to hide something, when it's not open. So there is always like a curtain that separates you from whoever you are talking with, because you can really not really open up and talk to them openly, right? So this is an issue that obviously we have to deal with, and Fern said correctly. So is the place also, oh, one more thing, Steve. The city of refuge has to have school, cemetery, and shops. So we know they existed because they had ordinary life in the city of ordinary life in the city of refuge, but not so ordinary because everybody was killers there, right? Brad, is that your hand?
Yeah.
Yes.
Rabbi, at the beginning, you also mentioned this other episode with the axe later on in the portion where enjoined not to take an axe to a tree because that tree, in the case of a siege, could also be that tree could be productive in the future. It could produce more fruit. And I'm wondering if the same image applies here to the person sent to that city of refuge, that he too can be productive in the future.
Excellent. Excellent. And you jump to the end, and I like that a lot. So your question and Fern's comment are very, very similar in my head. And why? Because when we have to hide something, first of all, as far as the trees are concerned, trees can be cut because they were used to cooking and warmth, but not fruit trees, just ordinary trees. So I want to put that to rest. But as far as what was it that you just said?
I said that we have two episodes here involving an axe. Axe,
right. So,
and then the
thank you.
second with the axe against the tree,
Right.
and we're prohibited from
down.
doing that because that tree could be productive.
Right. So it's two different.
If it's a fruit tree.
Right. So it's two different situations. First of all, if you are on your land and you are settled in your land, and the other, if you are besieging a city. If you're besieging a city and planning to conquer it, obviously you may not cut the fruit tree because you might need it. On the other hand, in the city when you are settled, you may cut trees because you need it for cooking and warmth, but it's not fruit trees. Okay, so that's something very important to know. So I'd like to go back to a little bit into the Talmud when it talks about in Masechet
Can I
Makot.
ask one more question before we do that?
Oh, sure, of course.
You talked about all these things they have to have, schools, shops, etc. Were there no normal, ordinary, non-accidental killers who lived there other than Levites?
No,
They had a whole city filled with people who accidentally killed people?
who were questionable, not necessarily accidental,
Right.
but questionable if it was an accident or purposeful,
But
premeditated
the only people who lived there are people who had
killers.
someone other than the Levites.
Correct.
Oh, I hadn't realized. Wow.
Yeah, that's a very important concept.
So it's kind of, so it's still like a prison. It's just more like one of these country club prisons compared to Alcatraz.
In a way, yes. In a way, yes. But remember that they were isolated. They were, pogromed away. They were isolated from everyone.
Were there women? Could they marry, have children?
Not in the city of refuge. And there are no, I don't know of a woman killer other than no, I'm correcting myself. Other than what was her name? Abigail, who killed the enemy of Israel, and she gave him milk and honey to drink. And he thought he's going to have sex with her, but she gave him milk and honey to drink. And when his stomach was full and he fell asleep, she chopped his head off. So
Well, I
yeah,
thought that was Samson and she just chopped his hair off.
different story, Steve. Anyway, okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So in Masechet Makot in the Talmud, it says, and I'm going to quote this, that it says that about the accidental killer entitled Elu hen hagolim. These are the exile ones. So it doesn't even call them the murderers ones, but it calls them the exiled. So it's very interesting because it follows the chapter where it talks about punishments. And these are those who are burned. It's using the word burned or exiled. And these are those who are strangled. They are using different adjectives to describe these killers. So if it's the exiled ones, or if it's the burned ones, or if it's the strangled ones, these are those who are killed also, right? In a way. So in this concept, the city of refuge are a place of punishment for a vague crime, right? You have to remember that, for a vague crime. In other words, that are not 100% sure that they actually did it, right? So if it's not premeditated, if it's just the axe flew away, and for a while he was looking for the axe, and finally he found it, and there was a dead man next to it. So, so the Mishnah in Makot emphasizes that it must involve some kind of negligence, personal negligence in the matter. So before you go chop a tree, you have to look at, is my axe really sturdy on the piece of wood? If the metal piece is steady on the piece of wood. So in this case, of course, we have to protect the accidental killer, right? From the severe vengeance of the family. So he uproots his whole life. And that's something that's very, very hard to take, as was said correctly. So if his sin is known, that's one thing, right? But if his sin is not known, that's another thing. what happens to the person, to his neshama? What happens to keeping the secret? I just came, listen to this. This week, a man who killed his severely autistic son in Israel. The man is 80 years old. The crime happened 50 years ago. He drowned him. He drowned his own son, who was 5 years old. And finally, at age 80, he comes to confess. He calls the police and says, "Come and arrest me. This is what I've done 50 years ago." So, is he an accidental? Definitely not. He would not have been in the city of refuge. He went free because it was he served like something because of the doubt of what happened, that he should have watched over his son a little more, because he was not able to make his own decisions at age 5. He should have watched him, so he served like 15 years, but now he comes out and says, "I actually killed him. I actually drowned him." So, but he's 80 years old, so what is he going to do at this point, right? So, but what do you do with the darkness in your heart? Can you live with it forever? This man was not able to. So, the interesting thing is what the Talmud says. The Talmud is teaching is that when listen carefully, this is interesting. When the man who is running away and coming into the city of refuge, the people there in the city want to honor him. In other words, welcome him to the community. And he says this way, he's required to tell them, "I am a killer." Right? And the people say, "Even though you are a killer, we want you here." Welcoming, right? Welcoming. Interesting. So, what do you think? Is there a place in our society today that works similarly to the city of refuge? Do we have something like that? That people accept the darkness of their own past, right? And try to go forward with it. What do you think it is? Is there, I will expand it a little bit. Is there a community that you are aware of that everyone knows what the monsters inside of you, what happened? It also can reach out. I don't see Mark. Mark, I see your hand.
Greetings, Rabbi. I would offer that slab city out in the desert east of the Salton Sea functions as such a place.
Okay.
Kind of tongue in cheek, but for real.
Okay. So my question is still on the table. Is there such community today that a person who have done something wrong can actually live with this wrongdoing? So I see Fern and I see Harvey. Yeah, Fern first.
So I just have two thoughts. One, I think that the various anonymous communities, the Alcoholics Anonymous,
Excellent. Great.
Do that, where they are urged to accept what they have done, to acknowledge what they've done, to make amends, etc. So I think that's one thing. I did want to say that it happened in our community, in our synagogue community, with a person who was involved in an accidental death and had a very hard time dealing with it. And during the high holy days, after a number of years, she stood in front of the congregation and she apologized to the whole congregation.
Wow.
it was an extraordinary thing, of course, for her to do, and an extraordinary thing for the synagogue to urge be done. Very brave.
Very brave. Very brave. And taking a big, huge risk that no one would look at her the same way.
Well,
Positive or
understand
negative, but
it
yeah.
wasn't even a risk. That was true. No one would
Yeah.
ever look at her the same way.
No, she was taking a huge risk that nobody
Understanding that nobody would ever see her the same way.
Yeah, whether it's positive or negative. Yeah, but this is exactly what that is. Brad, I saw your hand, but somebody else was first. I think Harvey, right? I just want to make a comment that the alcoholics, the first they have to admit, I'm an alcoholic, right? In every meeting, I'm an alcoholic. This is how they start. Well, in the city of refuge, he has to admit, I am a killer, whether it's accidental or not, but I am a killer, right? So you have to be very careful with that. Harvey?
I was just going to add that halfway houses are kind of like that. They're not
Right,
just killers, they're all kinds
right,
of people there.
right.
Mara had something to say too.
Yeah, I
Yes,
wanted
please.
to also go back to what you said about making sure that the axe was well
Ready.
maintained. And for me, that brings me to the importance of mindfulness.
Exactly.
So everything you do, everything you say, you must take the time first to think about the consequences.
The responsibility. Yes. Yeah, people carrying guns. And, the responsibility of carrying a gun. That
But
it
also
does,
everything you say, every word you say that might inflict great harm.
yeah. That's the idea of teaching Talmud in the prison for killers. Yes. That was exactly the idea. Thank you, Mara. Brad?
Well, I would say, in theory, that place is the prison today, which is meant to be an institution for rehabilitation of the individual. People forget that prisons were a creation of the Enlightenment. Previously, the way you dealt with somebody was you either tortured them or killed them or exiled them. The prison was meant to be a more humane way of
Rehabilitation. Yeah.
providing a way forward for that individual.
Right, right. And of course, we have that in the women's prison in Corona. We have that. They have a high school. They have a program even to get an AA degree, and there is a graduation. They celebrate the holidays. I'm talking about not only the non-Jewish. I'm talking about the Jewish holidays. Passover was always a big thing when volunteers from the outside would come in, and I mean, like 50 people will come in as guests for Passover to support the women who were there. It was like a big deal. Yeah. So prisons were made to rehabilitate. Yeah. Okay. So I'm fighting time. So I'd like just to share with you, and you touched on it correctly, and that person, Fern, that you have mentioned, is ultimately, I hope, is of course is a blessing, a source of blessing to the rest of the community. And I just wanted to share with you that when we talk about what can bring us a if there is a world without city of refuge, where do we find a healing? Where do we find the ability to talk about something that we hide? What space today? So we talked about the all the AA in those kind of meetings. The Talmud tells us divrei Torah koltin, which means like the city of refuge, the Torah provides us or accepts refuge. In other words, if we, the Torah can come and understand our vulnerability, trust our vulnerability. In other words, the possibility that we have the possibility to share the darkness of our lives so that we can be accepted again by society. So in the Torah, when we are lucky, or I would say not lucky, but when we are blessed, we are given the opportunity to build a different sort of community. A community like a Ir Miklat, like a city of refuge, where we can share the dark parts of ourselves. And it's engaging in Torah as a community, like we are, Chevra Torah. We create space where we can acknowledge that each one of us is flawed, that each one of us contain a little bit of a mini monster, that each one of us can create a space maybe to speak about our inner darknesses and create a community where trust in our community would not be rejected. And that's what you experienced, Fern, at that time. But we can speak about our inner weaknesses and we can tell to one another about it. And we're not going to be, and I hope we can create that in our Chevra Torah here, that whatever goes on in the class stays in the class, like Las Vegas, right? But yeah, we accept our flaws. So my sweet dear Chevra Torah, may we all be blessed to find the community that we need to be able to tell truth about who we are. And may we all be blessed to find a Chevra Torah like we are as a space of refuge. And I would say amen to that.
Right.
Well, I just want to say that
Rabbi,
you need to be
I say
careful
something.
because
Who is talking?
Wilshire Boulevard allows access to streaming of Chevra Torah. So we're not
Fabulous.
truly confined. There are other ways to access it. People watch this that we don't see on screen.
Yes. Can I please
Oh,
say,
that's interesting. Interesting topic you're bringing up. Shall we keep it to ourselves or can we? This is synagogue policy. So we
Rabbi,
probably, yes.
Rabbi, sorry to interrupt.
Who is
This is
this?
for Fern. I understand that the lady that stood up in front of the congregation told them about her problem. Did she ever, or did anybody else ever think about the survivors
Yes.
of the accident?
Yes.
That is a very important thing too that we have to think of. It's not only of the sinner, but it's also of those that have to live with it for the rest of their lives.
You are correct,
That
Helen.
is something that nobody wanted to touch, but it is a very difficult thing.
Definitely.
Sure.
Thank you for admitting to that, Fern.
Yeah. What is usually said at the end of our class is those who the Kaddish list. So those who have passed away during the past month are Nancy Dome, Marsha Dickinson Greenberg, Bern Givon, Gloria Kaufman, David Stockmer, Jane Weintraub, William Wolfe. Now, those who died in the yard site, for those who during the past year, are Deborah Gam, Robert Axel Anderson, George Ansel, Marjorie Ansel, Abraham Argai, Stephen Bartmesser, Selma Bell, Leslie Bloom, June Blumkin, Arthur Bogia, Louise Malmott, Sanford Brennard, Florence Kaplan, Marilyn Cohen, Parvis Denel Poor, Douglas Delaney, Sidney Diamond, Ruth Eben, Michael Eisner, oh, I knew him, Ben Evans, Diane Ross, Fenning, Reva Fields, Ruth First, Harold Garber, William Gilman, Leon Ginsberg, Barry Gold, Edward Goldstein, Harry Goldstein, Bella Gomberg, Maxwell, Alexander Gray, David Green, Ellen Gumpert, Harold Halprin, George Heldman, Sidney Ermes, Moses Israel, Joseph Jacobson, Milton Kaplan, Walter Keane, Patty Kerlick, Berman Cram, Margaret Kupidovsky, Edith Levinson, Isadore Lieberman, Dora Mendel, Sol Martenberg, Lou Markman, Rose Markwitz, Ellen Metzner, Sarah Miller, Shem Boyle, Nico Hamedeni, Mila Pletnig, Harold Pike, Davida Rischel, Marilyn Roberts, Robert Rosenblum, Elvin Rosenthal, Miriam Kilson Rosenstein, Zelda Rubin, Sheldon Sanders, Gloria Schell, Harry Schops, Jerome Schwartz, Maurice Shapiro, Howard Scheckler, Stanley Simon, Flora Suffin, Hyman Tenen, Brandon Tarkoff, Meryl Divoli, Dorothy Irma Weinberg, Mark Weisenberg, Jude
Hello.
Wolf, and Sheldon Zane.
Hello.
Anyone wants to add another name that you are commemorating today? Okay, so if you'd be so kind to rise for the Kaddish, and together we can say, יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה, בעולמה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, ועגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולמעולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעולמה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום
עלינו.
על כל ישראל.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the privilege to teach you and study with you and dig into the idea of the city